What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Bulls Latest. Your host, Matt Johnson here. Wanted to thank you guys for joining me on this Friday show, and also huge thank you to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this video. Have a great Friday show on tap for you guys today. Once again, huge shout out to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this video. Let's jump right into things today, guys. Wanted to recap the Bulls' last contest in their 108-93 loss against the Detroit Pistons. Cade Cunningham ended up missing the game for Detroit with a right wrist contusion. So that was a big loss for a Detroit team who at the end of the day was able to pull away in the fourth quarter even without his presence. I just think that when you look at the Bulls, like predicted and like I kind of anticipated, Coby White was out against Detroit. He was going to be on track to play in the second of the back-to-back against the Miami Heat. Had a bit of a bizarre situation there with that game. I'll get into that in a second. Modest Buzelis was also active for that Pistons contest. He was deemed questionable early on, later upgraded to probable. Now he eventually ended up playing. The Bulls, speaking of that fourth quarter collapse, they just got pounded in the fourth quarter, just ran out of gas. They were outscored 32-16 in this one in the fourth quarter. It looked as if being shorthanded really caught up to the Bulls in this one late in that fourth quarter. Ayo Dosunmu, however, kind of carried the load for a while. He did have a very solid night. He put up 24 points. He was 4 of 6 from deep. Had the three ball really going in this one. Vooch had a double-double, 20 points, 16 rebounds, 4 assists, so he continues to be a steady contributor for the Bulls. Modest added 20 points. He hits that 18-plus point mark yet again. And then looking at the Detroit side of things, Isaiah Stewart had a career night. He had a career high for the Pistons, 31 points. He really stood out in a game where their star was out in this one. And then kind of a surprising contributor in terms of the stat sheet, but Dennis Jenkins out of St. John's, the St. John's product, had a career high 15 assists off the bench for the Detroit Pistons. What a night for him, dishing the basketball. So the Bulls dropped this one. It's a tough loss given that the Bulls, again, were shorthanded. No Kobe. Unfortunately, they ran into a team in the Detroit Pistons who are a really formidable opponent in the Eastern Conference and show you why they're the real deal with games like this without their star players still being able to get the job done handily. So, I just think kind of diving into this next segment here, guys, the Bulls' lack of physicality is showing. Although the Bulls were shorthanded and were up against a thriving Pistons team, Cade being out, I did expect a lot more from the Bulls in terms of a physicality standpoint and what they showed. Vooch doubled down on that notion post-game, saying, quote, "We didn't sustain the physicality we needed to win this game," end quote. He's not wrong, and that's coming from a leader on this ball club. The Bulls need to play more physical, even if they have a smaller lineup. They don't necessarily have a big bruising lineup, but they have the guys necessary to be able to play a physical brand of basketball in order to be, stay in ball games. And the scrappier they can be some nights in terms of the physicality, the better off their odds are to stay in a lot more ball games, I think. And going forward with the inconsistent nature of who's available on a per-game basis, physicality is something the Bulls can carry over to these games that can allow them to compete. And it seems if I think Billy Donovan and his coaching style would definitely welcome that and push that to this young group of guys. So look for that to be an element of the Bulls game moving forward. Look for them to be more physical and to stay in these games in which they're kind of outmanned and shorthanded. So, that's just a look into that element of the Chicago Bulls there. Diving right into the Underdog segment, fast breaks, buzzer beaters, and block parties are back, and Underdog is the best place to get in on all the action. Playing on Underdog is easy. Just pick whether your players will go higher or lower on stats like points, rebounds, steals, and more. Get your picks right, and you can win 5,000 times your cash. This week on Underdog, I'm looking at, in specific, the New York Knicks and the Phoenix Suns game and selecting Jalen Brunson higher than 27.5 points and Devin Booker higher than 26.5 points. In that contest. Download the app today and use promo code BasketballFan to score $75 in bonus entries when you play. your first $5. That's promo code basketballfan. Underdog, make picks, win money, must be 18 plus and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Diving into, guys, I wanted to talk about a specific stat line for a guy I think is going to he's continuing to heat up here. And this is a player in the Chicago Bulls he's really carried the load and he's really come into his own here in recent games. I just think that when you look at Matas Buzelis, this is a guy who's going to continue to play monster basketball. Looking at his recent stats, guys, he's been the notion of consistency for this Bulls team, averaging, like I said, just over 18.5 points a game. He's put up 18 plus points in like 8 of his last 10 games. Obviously, the Miami game getting postponed due to condensation on the court. That was a bit of a bizarre sequence there, so he does not get to continue that hot streak on Thursday night at the United Center. But looking at this guy and what he's provided this Bulls team, in recent games here, New Year's Eve, he put up 19 points. That next Friday on the 2nd, he had 21 points against Orlando there. 17 against Charlotte. He did throw up 26 at Boston, allowed them to climb back into that game, and then 20 points at Detroit there. So he's looking to stay hot. He definitely has the hot hand. If I'm looking to play some players on Underdog Fantasy, I'm certainly looking at Matas Buzelis and taking the over on his points with how consistent he's hitting these marks in recent weeks here. Use promo code basketballfan. And I just think when you look at Matas Buzelis as a whole, I think he provides a great opportunity to make some money and hit on some of those picks. You could score, again, $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. That's promo code basketballfan. Underdog, make picks, win money. So lock in on Matas Buzelis. See what he is going to, what his line is going to be. I don't think it's going to be hard for him to withstand this streak that he's on, given that he's really the focal point of this Bulls team. Now, I know they're going to get Coby White back, but again, look to trend towards the higher on his points moving forward. So that's just a little segment there for you guys. Diving into what the Chicago Bulls are looking at in terms of the Mavs coming to town on Saturday. Again, like I was saying, kind of a bizarre situation with Thursday's game against the Miami Heat in the second of a back-to-back. They played the very beginning of the game. There was one three-pointer that was hit, and then the game was stopped due to condensation buildup on the floor due to a leak within the stadium building. This would carry on. I mean, they tipped right around 8:30, so it was delayed as well. And then it just never got going again. So really something I've never seen in all my years of watching the Chicago Bulls and going to Bulls games. I've never seen a game shut down due to an issue with condensation on the court. So this game was ultimately suspended, will be made up at a date to be determined. So let's look at the Bulls' next matchup. To cap off the week, they will host the Dallas Mavericks on Saturday. Dallas is coming into this one 14-24 in the year, just 3-7 in their last 10 games. So, it's been a trying year for Dallas up to this point. Cooper Flagg and the young Mavs team obviously, endured some turmoil there, letting go of executive Nico Harrison. That shook things up back from the jump. And that's a lot of tension for an organization that moved on from Luka Doncic just months ago. And probably the most controversial NBA trade in recent memory, maybe one of the most controversial trades in NBA history. So that Dallas team, it'll be interesting to get an up-close look at them. I think the Bulls should have a good opportunity with Coby White being back and then just being relatively healthy to get a home win to cap off the week and get things headed in the right direction again. if you're Chicago. Grab some momentum with this home W. That could be exactly what Chicago needs. They also could be looking at a shot to get Josh Giddey back in action next week. We'll have to check back in on that injury report from Billy Donovan and the Bulls staff. But, in the second week of the 2-week timetable for Josh Giddey, we'll have to keep an eye on that. But, why not go grab a win against the Mavericks, close out the week strong, and move into next week with some good momentum and then possibly some more momentum in getting Josh Giddey back in the fold. So that's just a look at what we have coming up here this weekend for the Bulls. Again, lean Modest Buzelis. I think he's going to have a monster game against Dallas. Go higher on his entries right now with Underdog Fantasy. Wanted to cap off today's show, guys, with a trade idea for you guys. We're getting close to it. I mean, it's already in the talks with a bunch of trade speculation all around the league. In this deal in specific, the Bulls would be involved in a trade with the Minnesota Timberwolves. The T-Wolves would get Tre Jones on the back half of this. The Bulls would receive Rob Dillingham and Terrence Shannon Jr. in return. Now, I know this is going to catch a lot of slack from the Chicago Bulls fan base here. I don't think that Tre Jones is a guy that the Bulls are looking to, willingly dish. But if they can get two young players back in Dillingham and Shannon Jr. that have a lot of promise, I think it's something you have to take a long, hard look at if you're the Bulls front office. The T-Wolves don't need a big swing at point guard. They need a complimentary mid-tier creator. That would do wonders for them with Anthony Edwards kind of being that superstar and that focal point on that team. And after all, Tre Jones is a Minnesota native as well, and his brother Tyus was also formerly a Minnesota Timberwolves guard. Not that has any direct correlation or impact with this move being made, but I just think that that's kind of an interesting backstory there. Overall, Tre Jones would provide the steady hand that Minnesota needs, and I think that his ball security would also offer Minnesota a major upgrade in that element of the game. I just think that when you look at Dillingham and Shannon, both of those guys carry a ton of value, and going to Chicago would also give them much more time to develop. Both guys have kind of tumbled, and this is why I think it makes a ton of sense to target these two guys. Is they've really tumbled down the T-Wolves' current rotation for Chris Finch. If you guys have tuned into a lot of Minnesota's games, they just don't get the minutes that I think they need in order to develop as young players. For a Chicago Bulls team that's on a kind of a rebuilding path here, there would be plenty of minutes and plenty of time for them to develop and multiple opportunities for them to succeed in different lineup combinations and in terms of what Billy Donovan can do with them. Two very talented guys. Now, I'm a huge Tre Jones fan, as you guys know, but Minnesota's on the prowl probably for a guard of his quality. So we'll see. Anything goes in terms of what the Bulls are going to do here. I, again, expect them to be sellers at the trade deadline and around it. So there's going to be a lot of movement from this Bulls roster, and definitely a lot of conversations with players such as Tre Jones moving forward. So, I just think it'll be interesting to see what the Bulls are all in on and what they're going to prioritize moving forward in the trade market. It did come out in the last couple days as well, and this is something that continues to resurface, but Zion Williamson it's been reported among multiple NBA outlets here. Zion Williamson could be a target of the Chicago Bulls. Now, am I in favor of bringing a guy in like Zion? I don't know if that's what this Bulls team needs. And certainly if you trade a guy like Tre Jones away for, some pieces in this hypothetical trade like Terrence Shannon Jr., Rob Dillingham, I don't know if Zion makes a ton of sense. Do you go one way or the other? What's your guys' take on the Bulls trade opportunities? What would you like to see them do? They certainly have a lot of options and a lot of directions that they could head this year in particular, given that they're kind of in that same situation that they've been so many of the recent years here in the play-in conversation. They're on the brink of the play-in standings, kind of hovering around 500. They're not consistently bad, but they also haven't been able to be consistently good enough to be buyers and to go all in an Eastern Conference that really this year is wide open. So definitely an interesting situation there, but there's a trade idea to cap off the show for you guys. Let me know in the comments what you would like to see the Bulls do. Do you think the Zion Williamson Rumors are just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. Would you like to see him here in Chicago? I know it's something we've talked about time and time again in this show. So anyway, thank you guys for joining me on another episode of Bulls Latest, and thank you to Underdog Fantasy once again for sponsoring this video. It's been a great week, guys. Look forward to another great week of basketball next week for the Chicago Bulls, and we will see you guys next time.